Bukhair. Good morning, Arapahoe. It is good to be back with you on this beautiful back-to-school Sunday. I'm Pastor Jonathan, and I love seeing all of our students and teachers here with their backpacks, blessed, ready for new adventures and new classrooms and new experiences. There's something just hopeful about beginnings, isn't there? Those fresh supplies, the clean notebooks. This might be the year you finally understand algebra, right? Or at least find someone who's willing to help. Of course, beginnings are both and. They are full of possibility and they're full of uncertainty and the anxiety that goes along with it. I've got a brand new middle schooler this year, and so I know that well. And I'm just talking about my anxiety too. But somehow, in this mix of uncertainty and possibility, something powerful happens when we find the courage to step forward together. We're beginning a 4-week series called Unfinished and United, journeying through Paul's letter to the Philippian community, a letter that is about the both and reality of beginnings and the ongoing, always unfinished journey that flows from there. Paul is writing from prison to a community that he loves, and his words are both honest about the uncertainty that they're facing, and they're overflowing with confidence in what God is doing through them, even in that liminal time. It's a letter about both being unfinished and together on this journey, still becoming who God calls us to be, but finding strength along the way in each other. So I've been thinking about the Philippian church lately because this summer, 25 of us from Arapahoe headed out to do something pretty uncertain together. We took a trip to Greece to walk the steps of Paul, including the ancient streets of Philippi. This was my very first group tour experience, and there was definitely uncertainty at first. Everybody has different travel styles, different energy levels, different ideas about what constitutes packing light, right? But here's what's beautiful about beginnings. You don't have to have it all figured out to step forward. You just have to be willing to walk together. In those first few days in Greece, there were definitely uncertain steps, but somewhere along the way, we moved from being a group of individuals on a trip to being a community on a journey together. And I can pinpoint for myself the exact moment when that changed. It happened at the Zagatis River, just outside of Philippi, where tradition tells us that a woman named Lydia was baptized by Paul. And this group gathered together by the ancient water for a brief service and an opportunity to remember our baptism there. Some splashed river water on their faces, others reached deep into the cool current, but all of us, amidst our diversity, chose in this moment to be on a journey together, wherever it would lead. And in that moment, we stepped into the stream of something extraordinary. Because nearly 2,000 years ago, Paul had stood by that very same river, just as uncertain as we were, but about to encounter a community that would choose to journey together and make a choice that would change everything. So picture this. Paul arrives in the port city of Philippi about 50 CE with his traveling companion Silas. Philippi was a Roman colony. It was a retirement community for the Empire of Rome's military veterans. And so Paul steps out as this Jewish missionary from Palestine, carrying a message about a servant Messiah, walking into the heart of empire, not knowing what to expect. And he's looking around for people to build community with, but where do you start? There weren't enough Jewish folks for a synagogue, and this was Roman culture. And so Paul follows the river outside the city, looking for a place of prayer and hoping along the way to find someone. And that's where he meets her. Not a Roman centurion, not a city official, but Lydia, a businesswoman, a Gentile, a merchant of purple cloth, in a Roman military colony, the person who becomes the cornerstone of this new community is someone the empire never would have chosen. But Paul wasn't building with empire principles. He was seeking to build with God's principles, building the right things in the right way, beloved community based on partnership, not power. And so Lydia listens to Paul's message of the radical life of service, of life, of love, of liberation, and something stirs in her heart. In Acts chapter 16 that tells this story, it says the Lord opened her heart, and then she does something remarkable. She steps into the river for baptism, not knowing where that decision would lead her, but certain she was ready to follow the way of love. But she doesn't step in alone. The story says that she was baptized along with her household, her business partners, her employees, her extended family. From the very beginning, this was about partnership, about building community, a place where everyone belonged and had a voice and a part to play. And immediately in the relationship there, Lydia does something that sets the tone for the whole Philippian community and everything that follows. She opens her home. It says this in verse 15. It says, she says to Paul and Silas, come and stay at my home. Not just visit, but stay. Let's do this together. And that open home becomes the place where the Philippian church grows. This is partnership from day one. Not hierarchy, but genuine mutuality, where each person has gifts and perspectives to offer, and they are essential to the character of the community. Lydia brings her business acumen, her house, her networks. Paul brings his theological training and maybe some baklava from Turkey. We don't have a lot of real things to offer other than that. But together, they start building something that will change the world. They start building things in the right way. What they built together was revolutionary, a community where slave and free, Jew and Gentile, all genders and all people were true partners in the work of love. When they stepped out into the world and they saw an exploited servant girl, they didn't just feel sorry for her, they worked together to get her free and to liberate her. And that's what Paul and Silas got thrown in jail for, because they were building a beloved community through liberating partnership, not maintaining the status quo through power. And while Paul was sitting in that Philippian jail, something beautiful happened. Even at the very beginning of forming that community, the community that Lydia and Paul were building didn't scatter. They came around him and they said, we're in this together, even when it gets hard. Because that's what happens when you build the right things in the right way. You create something that can sustain not just the good times, but the difficult ones as well. This is why Paul begins his letter with such gratitude. His letter to the Philippian community begins like this. In chapter 1, it says, I thank my God every time I remember you because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now. Partnership in the work of good, in the good news work. Even when things are uncertain, we're partners in this work of love, Paul says. The way of partnership is a powerful framework for how God envisions community. Not hierarchy, not dominance, but genuine interwoven mutuality where each person's gifts and perspectives are essential. Different gifts, but equal worth. Shared purpose, shared power, partnership. This isn't just idealistic thinking, it's truly practical wisdom. You may know that when relationships or households or churches or movements operate as partnerships, they become more creative, more resilient, more able to respond to the real needs and challenges of their life or of their community. We know something about the power of partnership here at Arapahoe. For years, this church has done incredible things, pouring love as partners into Dobie Pre-K school, building relationships, supporting families and teachers, creating community partnerships there based on mutuality rather than charity. And this past year, when Dobie Pre-K closed, it was hard. And we could have just said, well, we did that, it's over, right? But instead, the group of folks committed to building as partners asked the question, where is God calling us to partner now? And they listened to the community, they listened to the school districts, and the answer came. Carolyn Bukhair Elementary School, the school that many of the Dobie kids grew into. Uncertain as we began, but sure, united in our commitment to build the right things in the right way through genuine partnership. So a team began meeting with administrators and teachers and saying, hey, we're here as partners. How can we help? And listened and thought about how we could bring ourselves to the needs of the community. And then we leaned in. This summer, our VBS kids collected school supplies. And this past week, as you saw, folks from our church showed up at Carolyn Bukhair's back to school gathering. Amazing faces and relationships beginning to build, and incredible classrooms by some folks here in our church who serve as teachers there at Carolyn Bukhair. Each person just brings what they can, and all of us building together through partnership, not power. Because when you do that, even in uncertainty, God builds life every time. There's so many leaders who've been partners in that building and continue to be to shape that. But I want to take a moment of personal privilege to celebrate one of them who lives the way of partnership. I want to celebrate Pastor Kathy this morning. Who, as you can see, was just named Best of Richardson Best Community Activist this year, which is awesome. Standing in front of the Peace Pole in our Peace Garden, which is a part of a partnership here in our church as well, too. But Pastor Kathy has lived this way of partnership for years. She's been building justice and welcome and flourishing through partnerships with community leaders, with interfaith partners, with neighbors across all of the diversity of our community. And Kathy she's blushing right now because this is not usually what Kathy likes to celebrate. But she knows that we don't show up into this world as saviors with all the answers. We show up as partners in the work, ready to listen and to learn and to build together, to listen to the needs of our neighbors, to discern where God might be leading us, and to lean in and build the right things in the right way. And that when we do that, God builds life and liberation and love every time. And so thank you, Pastor Kathy, for helping lead our church in partnerships together. So, you might be thinking, yeah, we're partners, but look, we've still got pastors, right? Yes, someone needs to pray at the potlucks and, all those things. But there's a beautiful principle from our Methodist tradition that says that those who serve are set apart, not set above. Meaning, I've got a set apart role. I'm set apart to study Greek and Hebrew and try to make sure that everyone makes it back from Greece that wants to come back from Greece. Pastor Kathy's set apart for advocacy, for discipleship. Pastor Jenny for youth and family ministry. And you too are set apart for your work of love in your particular place and profession and vocation. We're set apart, but none of us is set above. We're partners, each bringing different gifts, different experiences, different ways of being. And you can go out into places and reach lives that we pastors never could. Partnership means our gifts work best when they work together, when they're working to build beloved community through shared power rather than concentrated control. Here in our church, we do that through partnering with teams like our leadership board and other leadership in our church and ministry teams, and working all of us together to empower you. Because here's what I've learned. The means create the ends. Meaning how we build, the means by which we go about building determines what we build. If we build with love, we create beloved community. If we build with shared partnership, what grows is empowering, life-giving connection that is resilient, responsive, radically different than the ways of this world, and empowered by the Spirit of God. And sometimes it's hard to see the fruit of that in the moment. When Paul stepped onto the shores of Philippi, he had no idea what the future might hold. He was just trying to start the right thing in the right way. And then sometimes you get a chance to look around and realize the seed that we've planted has borne fruit beyond our wildest imagination. And Paul caught a glimpse of this that we see in this letter. His story takes an unexpected turn. 10 years after that day by the river with Lydia, Paul finds himself now hundreds of miles from Philippi in a Roman prison cell, facing possible execution. And he's struggling with loneliness and fear and uncertainty about his future. And what sustains him? What gives him hope when everything is lost? The very community that he and Lydia built together all those years ago. The Philippians, hundreds of miles away, sent him a care package, sent him some money, some food, some clothing, and sent him a friend, Epaphroditus, to come and sit with him as a representative of the community and remind him that he's not forgotten. That uncertain partnership that started with a businesswoman stepping into a river has become the thing that literally saves his life. And the letter to the Philippians wasn't written in Philippi, wasn't even written in the jail in Philippi. It was written years later, hundreds of miles away, as a thank you to the community. And it overflows with gratitude and joy. And so that's why the story starts, the letter starts like this. I thank my God every time I remember you because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now. The means created the ends. They built community through partnership, not power. They shared resources, not hoarded them. They empowered each other, not controlled each other. And when the moment of greatest need came, what they had built together became exactly what was needed to sustain life. And God used it for good that reverberates through our book of Scripture even to this day. That's what God can do when we build the right things in the right way. What begins an uncertain partnership becomes life-giving community that shows up across time and distance precisely in those moments when hope seems lost. Right now, this community is important. As our sign outside our church says today, our world is heavy. Lift what you can. Because something powerful happens when we all do that. When we lift what we can, each of us, and when we help hold each other's weights when our arms get tired. None of us can carry the weight alone, but together we can carry what none of us could bear by ourselves. And when we do that, we see the uplifting power of God in and through and for each other. And so that's why Paul, after all the uncertainty and all the heaviness of it all, could write these words of hope. He says, I'm confident of this, that the one who began a good work among you will bring it to completion. Because God, after everything, Paul could see God's faithfulness. That what God started with Lydia's willingness to step out in courage, what God continued through the years of faithful partnership, what God used to sustain Paul even in the darkest hour, that work does not end. God is faithful. The work is hard, and the work for good can be discouraging and seem uncertain, but there is a promise. Step into the river. Keep going. Build the right thing in the right way and see what God can do. Step out into this world and remember that everyone has something essential to contribute, including you. And listen more than you speak. True partnership doesn't assume we know what others need. We listen, we learn, and we lean in to build together. And finally, when the time comes, we step into the river and we make that choice over and over again. It's a choice to continue building together, not a one-time thing, but through all seasons, to trust that when we build things in the right way, God will use them for life. And Arapahoe, this is who we are. This is who we've always been at our best. A community that listens, that honors the gifts of all people, and is willing to step into uncertain territory together, trusting that God is faithful to complete the work of love. Uncertain, but united. Unfinished, but faithful on the journey. Because when we build beloved community through partnership rather than power and create spaces where everyone's gift matters, God can do incredible things. What starts by a river can sustain us in the roughest times. What begins with school supplies can transform us and a neighborhood around us. What feels uncertain today can become the very thing that gives life tomorrow when we're partners in what God is building. Because God is faithful to complete it. Of this, I am confident. May we walk into this next season of our life as partners together in the work of love. May it be so among us. Amen.